and welcome to the second edition of Buckeye Blueprint, your weekly source for Ohio State football analysis. My name is Colin Hassel, and I'm joined once again by Nick McWilliams, sports editor of The Lantern, and Jacob Myers, assistant sports editor for The Lantern. Saturday night, Ohio State went into Norman and laid a 45-24 smackdown on the Sooners in front of the largest crowd in a sporting event in the history of the state. All three of us predicted the Buckeyes would come out with a victory, but not all of us expected such a dominant performance.
I will admit, whenever I was making my prediction, I really did think this game was going to be a lot closer. I thought Oklahoma's defense might clamp down a bit at Ohio State, and they'd struggle sometimes. But really, it didn't really ever seem like that case. I said 30-27, and obviously that's not even close to what it came out as. But this team, coming in, they were very young. The Buckeyes, that's what they've been talking about all year. They've said we're young, we have to get experience and everything, and well, I think they proved themselves pretty handily here.
Yeah, that was an incredible performance. I really didn't expect it. I thought that going into the game, I thought that Ohio State would maybe struggle early and then they would sort of catch wind later, and that was totally the opposite. They came out of the gate and started off in a 14-0 lead right in the first quarter, and it was away. They never looked back. It was incredible.
Yeah, the first couple games, we obviously knew who the number one playmaker was in Curtis Samuel. But as far as the receiving core went, it was still kind of a mystery until this game when Noah Brown hauled in 5 receptions for 72 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, who can forget his incredible catch when he pinned it on the defender's back going into halftime, just 6 seconds before halftime. They had a big answer, too, early in the second half after Mixon's kickoff return. 11 plays, 89 yards, little fade route to Brown on a third down. Really big plays there, and it really seemed to spark the offense, and they really never looked back.
Yeah, that's true. I've been looking for who is going to be Ohio State's option behind Curtis Samuel, and especially in the red zone, because Curtis Samuel is small. You can't really trust him in that red zone. You want someone who can go up and get the ball. And with 4 touchdowns, I think Noah Brown made himself that guy. And looking forward in the red zone, I wonder how many touchdowns he's going to have at the end of the year, because he really 4 touchdowns. He's setting a high bar. He's never getting that again.
He tied a school record.
He did tie a school record. I couldn't believe that happened 3 times prior myself.
You said about Noah Brown proving himself. He's kind of a young guy on this team. Another young guy on this team who's really making a name for himself right now is Jerome Baker. Jerome Baker, of course, was filling in for Dante Booker after being injured last week against Tulsa. And, Baker came in and through 2 games so far, he's got 14 tackles, a sack and a half, and he's also had that 68-yard interception return for a touchdown, rather. And he also had a fumble recovery. So, Baker is coming into a role that was kind of unfriendly for him. He's a young guy who didn't have much experience, played running back in high school. So, to fill in for a guy like Booker and to produce that well against a team like Oklahoma, I'd say that really says a lot about him.
And like I was saying before the show started, Ohio State has a really good problem right now. They got a lot of talent in the linebacking core, and that's, going forward. They have a lot of talent everywhere, which is impressive. And I know you wanted to touch on the depth as well at the cornerback position.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all know what Malik Hooker can do at safety, and Gary Conley was supposed to be the next in line of the Duran Grants and all the NFL-worthy cornerbacks that have come out of this program. Bradley Roby, yeah, you mentioned it, first-round picks after another. He went down with injury, but even before that, when he went out for the rest of the game, Denzel Ward and Marshawn Lattimore were in there on crucial third downs, going into the red zone, and seemed to hold their own. The defensive line did a great job of getting pressure on Baker Mayfield, but when the cornerbacks needed to make a play, the younger guys, they were able to do so. I don't expect them to miss much time. Urban said he's going to be fine. They got a bye week this week to get healthy. But if he is to miss any time, they are obviously prepared for a situation like that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And going into the year, I think most Ohio State fans were pretty worried about the youth back there. And the talent has come through, and Ohio State can't possibly be worried about that anymore. Urban Meyer talked after the game. They think Gary Conley is going to be fine. But even if he wasn't, I think they'd be okay long term.
In a big game such as this, you look at the turning points of the game. You may see OSU never trailed in the game, but don't mistake the fact that early on there were some plays that set up the success of Ohio State. I look particularly at the 27-yard field goal missed by Austin Seibert of Oklahoma. They drove down right away 65 yards and didn't quite face a third down yet. Defense finally made a stand in the red zone, which could have put OSU on their heels had they been trailing. But after that, the offense finally settled in. A 4th down play. Urban calls a timeout, and OSU goes right to Curtis Samuel, their number one playmaker, scores on a 36-yard touchdown run. After that, another fourth down face, Baker Mayfield, ball tipped at the line, Jerome Baker returns it 68 yards. Little plays like that, OSU goes up 14-0. The fourth down plays, also on offense and defense, and then that missed field goal really put OSU on great terms for success the rest of the game.
Urban Meyer has always had the philosophy of running the football to command the game, and against Oklahoma it was no different. The Buckeyes had 291 yards rushing, and Mike Weber performed extremely well with 123 yards himself. Curtis Samuel added a score, and the Sooners got tired out on defense. Eventually, the running really opened up the passing game for Ohio State, and J.T. Barrett found Noah Brown for 4 touchdowns on the day. Samuel right now at this point in the season is averaging 8.1 yards per carry and is really seeming like that hybrid that Urban Meyer had been talking about all offseason. Barrett is running the ball too, albeit a little bit more than Urban Meyer was expecting. During camp, Urban Meyer said that he only wanted J.T. Barrett to carry the ball 10 to 12 times in a game. However, Barrett carried the ball 17 times during the Oklahoma game.
Nick mentioned that Urban Meyer has always relied on the running game for their offense to succeed, and that's really been the case so far. With Mike Weber and Curtis Samuel among J.T. Barrett and others, it's really been impressive what Ohio State's been able to do on the ground and being able to keep the ball on offense and never turn it over, basically. The Buckeyes turned it over against Bowling Green when J.T. Barrett threw his one interception, which was returned for a touchdown in the very first drive of the game. And not only have they not turned the ball over, they've turned their opponents over. 9 interceptions and 2 fumble recoveries. I thought coming into the game, Ohio State was going to struggle to turn Oklahoma over, even though Oklahoma came into the game with a few interceptions in themselves. But that seemed to not be the case. When I think of turnovers, I think that they're inconsistent, and teams are going to struggle to consistently force turnovers. But that doesn't seem to be the case with Ohio State. If they can keep this up, that's going to be extremely impressive. And I think they've had some holes on defense, especially in allowing runs of 8 to 10 yards and just allowing Oklahoma and other opponents to continue drives. But that's if they can continue to get turnovers, that won't really matter long term. But going forward, I want to see if this continues. I have my doubts, but to me, that's the reason why Ohio State beat Oklahoma, is they could get up with Jerome Baker getting his interception return for touchdown. They got up 2 touchdowns in the very first quarter, and they never looked back. It may be difficult to find any holes in the Buckeyes' performance after a game like that, but I know Nick wanted to address something Urban Meyer and the coaches should discuss with Ohio State as they head into their bye week.
Yeah, Ohio State in this game, there were a few times against Oklahoma, and we've seen against Tulsa and Bowling Green too. There were some big runs and some very big running lanes for the running backs and even the quarterbacks for the opposing team. So although statistically speaking, Ohio State has done pretty well in containing the run, I really think that the coaches and the Buckeyes really need to focus on crashing the holes much quicker and getting off of their blocks in order to get to the ball carrier. Yeah,
I think this game, before the season, we all circled this game as the defining game before conference started. We're going to find out exactly how good this team was. I think for the most part we know that now, but going into a bye week, they have a little more time to digest that. And I think the players and the coaches especially have to be aware of maybe some hubris going around the team. Just how good is this team? They may try to go to their head. And once they face adversity, will they just lay down, or will they persevere through that and continue on with this fine season they're having thus far? That really defines a championship team. We saw it in 2014. 2015 had some issues with that, but I think that's one thing this 2016 OSU team really needs to be on the look for.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
This team, they grew up against Oklahoma a lot, but now it's time to stay grown up. They have to really continue to play at this high of a level against every opponent. It doesn't matter who they are.
And you said that the 2014 team did that, but the one difference, so Urban Meyer's been comparing the 2014 team and the 2016 team a lot, but the one difference is that team fought through the adversity of losing to Virginia Tech. And I don't know what this young team's going to feel like if they beat Oklahoma, and now they have a few easy games ahead. They have this bye week. You never know what they're going to be thinking. Now they have more first place votes. Maybe they'll be number 1 at some point, and how will that young team affect? And I know we wanted to touch on, since we can't touch on the game that Ohio State's going to play this week, is they're heading into a bye, which seems pretty early in the year. What is going to be the next game that the Buckeyes are going to really have to struggle and win? Because we knew Oklahoma was going to be going into the year. We knew Tulsa and Bowling Green weren't. What's going to be the next game?
I think you can circle the next road test for Ohio State. Historically, they have not played well up at Camp Randall in Wisconsin. Obviously, we know they have a dynamic running game, and they always have a staunch defense. Quarterback play has always been iffy for Wisconsin, but that crowd is going to be loud. You know, it's a late game, so the fans are really going to be into it. Just look at that game for OSU really to be tested and maybe trail for some of the game.
You know, you said it best. You know, that crowd's going to be really loud. It's going to be really rowdy. And we saw against Oklahoma a few times. JT Barrett seemed to struggle to get the play in sometimes. They had some delay of games. They had to call some timeouts. They burned a lot of timeouts early on, which ended up not hurting them. But against a team like Wisconsin in a Big Ten matchup, you really could have a problem. And Wisconsin is one of those teams that, like you said, historically Ohio State's just always kind of seemed to struggle with, especially when they're playing in Wisconsin. So while this team has looked incredible on paper, it will be really time for them to prove that, you know, we really do deserve to be in the top four. They really do deserve to be one of those teams that deserves a final look in the end of the season.
Mm-hmm. And all right, so the Buckeyes have an off week this week. Next week they'll have Rutgers at home at noon. But this has been all for the Buckeye Blueprint. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram and like us on Facebook. I think I did that right. If not,
yeah, you
guys know what to do. All right, thank you, Nick and Jacob, and we'll see you next week.